Right now, hanging on the wall of my shed here in Okinawa, there is a hammer that has been broken 4 times in its life. The head came loose twice, the handle cracked once along the grain on a cold morning, and once, many years ago, the handle snapped clean through at the neck, which is the injury that sends almost every hammer in the world to its grave. That hammer is 62 years old. It belonged to my grandfather, and this morning I drove fence staples with it for an hour, and it struck as true and tight as the day he bought it. 4 times broken, 4 times repaired, right here on this bench, with a few cents of material and an hour of quiet work each time. The store would have sold us 5 hammers by now. We have owned one. Today, I am going to show you the old Japanese way to bring a broken tool back. The loose head, the cracked handle, the snapped shaft, repairs that do not merely patch a tool, but leave it tighter and better than it came from the store, and last for decades. My name is Kenji Takara. I am 81 years old, and I have lived my whole life on the island of Okinawa, in the far south of Japan. I was raised by people who could not drive to a store when something broke, and more than that, by people who would have been quietly ashamed to. In my grandfather's shed, a broken tool was not garbage. It was the afternoon's work. He repaired his own axes, hoes, saws, hammers, and shears for 60 years, and his father did before him, and the skills they used were not rare talents. They were ordinary household knowledge, passed down the way recipes are passed down, in every farming village in Japan. In my country, we even have a famous art of repairing broken pottery with gold, kintsugi, where the mended crack is displayed proudly instead of hidden, because we believe a thing repaired well is not a lesser thing. It is a thing with a history. What I will teach you today is the workshop cousin of that idea, the honest, practical craft of tool repair that every old farmer knew and almost everyone has now forgotten. But before I show you, let me tell you the part that should make you a little angry. Go to the hardware store and look at the hand tools. And I mean really look. Notice how many hammers, axes, and garden tools now come with the head and handle molded together in one piece of plastic and fiberglass. Sealed, riveted, impossible to open. Ask yourself, why would a company build a tool so that its most commonly worn part, the handle, cannot be replaced? Your great-grandfather's hardware store sold replacement handles by the barrel, hammer handles, axe handles, hoe handles, 40 cents each, because everyone knew handles wear and heads last forever. Today the handle is welded to the head on purpose so that when the handle goes, and it always goes, you must throw away a perfectly good steel head along with it and buy the whole tool again. They did not forget how to make repairable tools. They stopped deliberately because a repairable tool is a customer lost for 30 years. The throwaway tool is not an accident of progress. It is a business model, and the repair knowledge I am about to give you is exactly what that model needs you to never learn. Now here is where almost everyone goes wrong, and it is the reason most home repairs of tools fail quickly and convince people that repair doesn't work. When a hammer or axe head comes loose, what does the modern man do? He drives a screw down beside the handle. He hammers in a nail. He floods the gap with glue, and for a week it holds, then it wobbles again, worse than before, and now with a screw rattling in the wound. Here is what he never understood. A tool head is not held on by fasteners, and it was never held on by glue. It is held on by pressure, by wood expanding inside the steel eye until it grips like a fist, The old system is beautiful. The handle's top passes through the steel eye of the head, and into a saw cut in that top, a tapered wooden wedge is driven, which spreads the wood outward against the walls of the eye. Pressure in every direction, wood against steel. When the head loosens, it is because the wood has shrunk or crushed and the pressure has faded. The repair, then, is never to add a screw. It is to restore the pressure, and done the old way, the restored joint grips harder than the factories ever did. So let us begin with the most common broken tool on earth, the loose head, the hammer that wobbles, the axe that shifts with a dull click at every swing, the sledge you no longer trust. This repair costs almost nothing and takes less than an hour, and it is the gateway to everything else. First, take the head off completely. Do not be timid. If it is loose, work it off the top of the handle. If it resists, clamp the handle and drive the head upward with taps on its underside. Now look into the steel eye and at the handle's top and read the story. Crushed wood fibers, old shrunken wedges, perhaps some fool's screw from a past owner. Pull out the old wedge remnants with pliers. Clean the eye of the head down to bare steel. This is also the perfect moment for the vinegar bath I taught you before, if the head is rusty. Second, refresh the handle's top. If the wood is sound but compressed, you may simply need a deeper saw cut and a new, fatter wedge. Saw the slot down the center of the handle's top, about 2/3 the depth of the eye, if the old cut has closed or crushed. Third, the secret my grandfather swore by, the one detail that separates a repair that lasts a season from one that lasts 20 years. The wedge must be hardwood, bone dry, and driven home like you mean it. Cut a wedge from the driest, hardest scrap you have, oak, hickory, even a piece of an old broken handle, dried by years indoors. Never soft pine, never fresh wood. Seat the head, stand the tool upright, and drive that wedge into the saw, cut with firm blows, until it will not move another hair, the wood spreading inside the eye, gripping the steel in every direction. Saw off the excess flush. Many old-timers then add 1 or 2 small steel wedges, driven crosswise, $1 for a card of them at any hardware store that still remembers what it used to be. And then comes the final step, the one almost nobody alive still knows, the little trick that makes the joint tighten itself as the years pass instead of loosening, and it uses something you have in your kitchen right now. The final step is oil, but not oil on the metal, oil into the joint itself. Stand the finished tool head down in a shallow dish with a spoonful of linseed oil, the boiled linseed oil of the paint aisle, a few dollars a bottle that lasts years. Or brush the oil generously onto the exposed end grain of the handle inside the eye, and let it drink overnight. Here is why this small, strange step matters so much. The enemy of the wedge joint is shrinkage. Wood drying out over the years, pulling away from the steel, loosening its own grip. Linseed oil soaks deep into the end grain and hardens slowly inside the wood, feeding it, sealing its moisture, keeping the fibers swollen and springy inside the eye for decades. The old carpenters of Japan oiled every tool joint this way as a yearly ritual, and their heads did not loosen in a lifetime of work. And a habit worth keeping forever. When a head does begin to whisper loose in dry winter air, a night standing in a dish of oil will very often swell it silent again before a wedge is ever needed. That is the self-tightening secret, not a product, just the patient marriage of oil and end grain. Now, the second great repair, the cracked handle. A crack running along the grain. From a cold day, an overstrike, a dry decade. does not mean death if you catch it before it spreads. Work wood glue deep into the crack. The trick is to flex the crack gently open and force the glue in with a thin blade or a scrap of paper, again and again, until it will take no more. Then clamp it, a proper clamp, or the poor man's clamp my grandfather used. A tight spiral of strong cord wound the length of the crack and twisted taut with a stick. Leave it a full day. Then, for a working tool, add the old reinforcement. A whipping, a tight, neat binding of waxed cord or strong twine wrapped shoulder to shoulder over the repaired section. Each turn pulled hard against the last, the ends buried under the wraps. Soaked afterward with a coat of that same linseed oil, a whipped repair grips like a cast on a healed bone, adds grip to the handle, and, I will say it plainly, looks honorable. In my country we do not hide a good repair. The whipping on my grandfather's hoe handle was tied before I was born, and it is tied there still. And the third repair, the one that fills the trash bins of the world, the snapped handle, the clean break at the neck, the shaft in two pieces. Here is the truth. The store depends on you not knowing. The handle was always the sacrificial part. The steel head, the forged, hardened, valuable heart of the tool, is almost certainly perfect. The handle is simply the part that wears, like the tires on a car, and it was always meant to be replaced. A new hickory replacement handle for a hammer, an axe, a shovel, a hoe, still costs only a few dollars at farm stores and old-fashioned hardware stores, or online if your town has forgotten. And now you know the whole craft already, because fitting a new handle is nothing but the loose head repair from the beginning. Drive out the old broken stub from the eye, drill it, chisel it, burn it out in a careful fire if it is stubborn, keeping the steel's temper safe by never letting the head glow. Then fit the new handle, shaving it with a rasp or knife until it seats snug and deep in the eye. Saw the slot, drive the wedge, cut it flush, and stand it in the oil overnight. An hour of honest work, a few dollars, and the tool your father snapped is whole again, often tighter than the day it was made. My grandfather's hammer, the one on my wall, is on its second handle in 62 years. The head has never changed. The tool, you understand, was never really the handle. The tool is the head, and the head, cared for, is eternal. Now let me give you the layers that most people overlook, the differences between a man who fixed a tool once and a man whose tools simply never die. First, learn to read a tool's complaints early. A tool almost never breaks without whispering first. The hammerhead that turns a hair's width in your grip, the faint click in the axe at the top of the swing, the hairline shadow along the handle's grain. These are whispers, and a whisper costs an evening, a wedge, a night in oil, a whipping of cord, while a shout costs a new handle, and ignoring the shout costs the tool, or worse, sends a loose axe head flying on the downswing, which is no small thing. Once a season, walk your tool wall the way I taught you to walk your fence line. Grip each head and try to twist it. Run your thumb down each handle and listen. 10 minutes, 4 times a year. Nothing on that wall will ever surprise you again. Second, the yearly oiling, the ritual that prevents half of all repairs before they are needed. Once a year, my grandfather did it in the quiet week after New Year. Every wooden handle in the shed gets wiped down with a rag of boiled linseed oil, the whole shaft, and an extra thirsty drink for the end grain at the head. The oil feeds the wood, keeps it from drying and shrinking and cracking, keeps the wedge joints swollen tight, and leaves the handles with that smooth, warm, living feel that no plastic grip has ever matched. One bottle, one rag, one afternoon once a year, and the cracked handle repair I taught you becomes a skill you will rarely need. Third, rescue other people's despair. Once you own these skills, the world changes shape around you. The yard sales, the estate sales, the curb on trash day, they fill up with broken tools, loose-headed axes for $1, snapped-handled sledges for nothing, forged old-growth steel from an age when tools were made to be repaired, thrown out by people who were never taught what you now know. My shed holds half a dozen tools rescued this way, each one bought for less than a cup of coffee, each one repaired in an evening, each one better steel than anything on the store shelf today. The knowledge does not just save your own tools, it lets you harvest the waste of a world that throws away treasure. Let me tell you now the story of the hammer on my wall, because I owe you the fourth repair, the snapped neck, and it is not really a story about a hammer. I was 14. My grandfather had lent me the hammer, his father's before him, and I misused it, prying with it, something he had told me never to do, and the handle cracked at the neck and gave way in my hands. I stood in the shed holding the two pieces, and I remember wishing the ground would take me. I offered, in a small voice, to buy him a new one from the town with my own saved coins. And my grandfather looked at the broken tool and then at me for a long, quiet moment, and then he said, "Why would I want a new one? This one is not finished, and neither are you." And he sat me down at the bench, and that afternoon he taught me everything I have taught you today. The drilling out of the stub, the shaving of the new handle, the slot, the wedge, the oil, with my own guilty hands doing every step while his voice guided them. When it was done, he swung it twice, nodded once, and hung it on the wall. He never mentioned it again. That is kintsugi, my friends, not the gold, but the meaning underneath the gold. The mended thing carries its history, and the mending itself can be the lesson and the honor. I have repaired that hammer 3 more times across the years since, and every time I am 14 again in that shed, and he is beside me. And that is the larger truth under everything today. We live in the first age in all of human history that throws away tools, the one class of objects that every generation before us guarded, repaired, and handed down as a matter of course. The store has taught 3 generations that broken means finished, because their shelves are stocked on that belief. But you have seen now what broken really means. A wedge that needs renewing, a crack that needs binding, a handle, the sacrificial part, the tire of the tool, that needs its scheduled replacement. An hour at the bench, a few cents of wood and oil. To repair your own tools is to keep a promise the whole modern world has broken, that the things which serve us deserve better than the landfill for the crime of wearing out. That is Matanai, waste nothing, not the forged steel, not the money, not the history in a 60-year-old handle, and not the chance to sit a grandchild at the bench, hand them the wedge and the mallet, and pass down the oldest lesson of the shed, that in this family we do not throw away what we can heal. So tell me, in the comments below, where in this world do you live? And what broken tool is waiting in your shed or garage right now? The wobbling hammer, the cracked axe handle, your father's sledge in 2 pieces? Tell me your place and your tool, because I read every message that comes to me, And I would dearly love to know who among you drives their first wedge this weekend and hangs a dead tool back on the wall, alive. And the next time we sit together, I will show you the other half of my grandfather's tool wall. The way he stored and organized a lifetime of hand tools in a small shed so that nothing rusted, nothing was lost, and any tool could be found in the dark with one reach. A system so simple it can be built in an afternoon with scrap wood, and so good that I have never once changed it in 40 years. Until then, waste nothing, repair what you love, and remember always that the people who lived closest to the earth understood things that we, with all our bright new aisles and all our full trash bins, are only now beginning to remember once again.